The Psychology of the Solar Plexus and Subconscious Mind by Julia Seton, M.D. Chapter 3, Conscious Union of the Centers of Being. It is not enough that we know the function of the cerebrospinal center and the solar plexus brain. We must know how to connect and master them. We do this by the power of conscious willing. We know the truth, and the truth sets us free. Union and conscious relation of these centers of being within us give us health, strength, beauty, and youth on the physical plane, and open the door for divine revelation to the soul. The prophets and mystics of old sang ever of their solar center of divine influx. The Hebrews ascribed to the rains knowledge, joy, pain, and pleasure. It is written, God upbraids the Jews for having him in their mouths, but not in their reins. The psalmists say, his reins instructed him, for righteous God trieth the heart and the reins. My reins instructed me in night sessions, thus giving the clue to all visions and prophecies, and we know clearly that these men of old vaguely hinted for the reins, or simply the solar plexus center of the body. We are all familiar with the umbilical cord of the newborn child. It is the cord between the child and its supply while in its unfoldment stages. This cord on the external plane stands simply as a symbol of the other subjective cord, as above, so below. Those who can see the finer etheric bodies can easily see an etheric cord passing from each individual, connecting him with the finer currents of the universe. It is always present while one is alive on this plane, and as long as it is not disassociated, resuscitation of those who appear to be dead can take place. Over this cord there is continually passing in and out through the reins or solar plexus, the impulses we call life. All sight, hearing, feeling, and emotion, all subjective sensations are the product of the activity of these currents acting upon the solar plexus brain and nerves, and through these upon the physical brain and nerves. There is but one sense, but this sense is differentiated by the physical centers into touch, sight, seeing, taste, and smell. Sound comes to us through the solar center, and the nervous systems register it in the localized hearing centers. There are individuals so developed that they can hear with other parts of their body as well as with their ears. The ears, with their fine nervous arrangement, are used simply to correlate sound and prevent the expansion of tone. Sight is the same when one is sufficiently alive in his solar center. He has clairvoyance and cosmovoyance. He can see through space. People have been known to tell what was going on in different cities, seeing as plainly as if they were there. The optic centers are only fine arrangements of nerves by which one may correlate and localize his vision for physical objective use. And when he knows the finer relationship of self, he projects and expands his vision or lessens it at will. What the race calls the love energy is localized in the solar plexus. Any disappointment in love reacts upon the body through the exaggerated functions of the solar plexus center and sympathetic nervous system. One has only to recall the quick declines following a great disappointment. Heart disease and quick consumption are well-known expressions. All the sympathetic centers are so closely and carefully attuned that heart disease, heart failure, angina pectoris, and all the subjective heart symptoms are the product of abnormal solar functioning, and through the cardiac centers, the heart responds and mind and emotions of the individual setting up the abnormal vibratory law. It is well known by all mystics that kidney troubles of all kinds are the physical response to abnormal sensory stimulus or expression, such as excess in sympathy, love, passion, drink, or repression. Often it is the result of carrying a secret for years. Psychical repression of all kinds brings about abnormal renal functioning, and this is not hard to explain when one remembers that the suprarenal capsules of the kidneys are supplied in a wonderful way by the sympathetic nerves. The scientists themselves say the branches of these plexus are remarkable for their large size in comparison with the organ they supply. Neurasthenia, the great American disorder, is simply the overactivity of the cerebrospinal system of nerves and physical brain centers. Cyclothenia is the result of hyperactivity of the solar plexus brain brought about by loss of control of the thought centers of the physical brain, allowing feeling to overexcite the solar plexus brain, and through congestion of this center flood the system with an excess of electroradiant energy which cannot be taken care of by the physical cell centers. Both of these diseases will be cured when doctors and patients learn the true relationships of the centers of mind and body and establish true physical and psychical relationship through thought and breath, not allowing the system to be driven on by a wild explosion of electrical force. Constipation is another American disease, and its cause and cure are in the solar center. There is no longer any excuse to continue with this limitation if we will follow the law of our own being and vitalize and electrify our body. In the normal individual, the solar center is receiving a continuous influx of energy, coming to it from without, passing in through the solar cord as the receptive or negative breath, and through the lungs as the creative positive breath. This energy passes into the solar plexus through the etheric waves coming from the sun, then from it over the nerves of the solar ganglion to the external nervous system of the spinal cord, then to the pineal gland, then to the brain. The pineal gland is the central point in the human brain where this energy is localized or controlled and sent out as needed at the call of the physical cells. It is always passing out in quantity sufficient to energize, vitalize, and etherize the flesh when the relationship is normal. But when it is broken, through diseases of the mind and lack of correlation of the centers of being, the control is lost, the regulating power ceases, and a vicious cycle takes the place. A diseased nervous system is the result. The pineal gland is the reservoir which stores up vital energy for physical supply, and each cell in the body has its own normal amount stored within it so that the exhaust and supply is equal in a perfect body. The solar center is controlled, excited, and quieted through the natural law of breath, through the lungs, and through thought control of the mind. We must breathe correctly before we can polarize these psychical centers continuously. The great muscle of respiration is the diaphragm, and in the descent and release of the diaphragm, there is brought about a control over the circulation of the solar plexus brain. An increased determination of blood to any center excites its function, just as a decreased lessens it. So that with complete breath control, the circulation of the solar plexus brain is a thing of our own making, and we increase it or decrease it at will. In many cases of pulmonary hemorrhage, this natural law of the control of all sympathetic functioning through compression of the solar center, brought about through the forced descent of the diaphragm, has stopped hemorrhages which were before uncontrollable. Deep, slow breaths relieve internal congestion and draw the blood from the superficial vessels, and through the thoracic portion of the sympathetic cord, control of the pulmonary vessels is brought about. Slow, deep breaths change our vibrations by increasing the molecular activity of our physical cells. In many people, the solar plexus is inert, pale, bloodless, and not capable of attracting through itself the required amount of vibratory ether. When through breath we massage the solar plexus, we increase the determination of blood to the center. And with this increased molecular activity, there begins to be a greater influx of energy, and the whole body soon begins to respond with a new life. With this influx of energy, the cells of the physical body again release the latent force within them, and as this is passed out in radiations from the physical cells of the body, which in turn demand a new supply, the pineal gland is again excited into its normal action of supplying and demand. The centers of the physical body and brain become normal in their functioning, and the correct internal and external cycle of psychophysical activity has been restored, and the individual is in health. The great creative energy of the universe is always flowing through us just as the current runs along the line. And this passing in of the finer etheric currents to be used in the construction, rebuilding, and vitalizing of the body and mind, and the passing out again from the physical body in lines of electrical force, is what constitutes the human aura. And those who are actively alive in their radiation are called magnetic and attractive. When one is in disease, the aura is correspondingly lacking in magnetic or attractive power. The great secret of human life is to have a magnetic selfhood and to hold consciously the correct relationship between these two centers of being. It is not enough to come into life and pass along taking ourselves a confused bundle of states. To be Lord of our own kingdom, man must master himself, and only through understanding can we pass in conscience dominion. From the subjective solar side of consciousness, we receive all the God-born impulses which manifest as human aspiration and revelation. And through the external brain consciousness, we can give out the godlike expression of a divinely illumined mind. The great wisdom of the centuries is registered in the cosmic mind, and it is always beating upon us through our solar center. We are children of the sun, and in its converged rays we walk and live and have being. With a carefully attuned human mind, thinking in unison with the finer rays of the universal mind, our common consciousness becomes the great wireless station with which we can register the cosmic messages, and through this bring illumination to our daily life and health to our physical forms, until at last we vibrate to a universal intelligence so high that, by the natural law of atomic attraction, we build a physical body of substance so vibrant that it becomes indestructible, and we are out into a new human experience made possible by our deeper understanding. When we know the true psychology of self, we join all the diverse currents of the human brain and its idea centers with the unified current of power that comes to us from within the solar centers. Then the physical and metaphysical are one. We pass from the part of the law of life into the whole. We are lords of the physical, lords of the mental, lords of the spiritual, and lords indeed of this lower kingdom. And our human life is linked with its source. End of chapter 3 of The Psychology of the Solar Plexus and Subconscious Mind by Julia Seton, M.D.